Hey guys, welcome to the channel. As you see in the thumbnail, what if issei was White Dragon and Harem with Grayfia Raynare? Before I start, please do support for more awesome content, and subscribe my channel and like this video. Go support and follow the DarkSwordMage for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story. Link in the description. Let's start this video. Alright then, issei, hold out your left hand and try imagining the strongest image you can in your mind. Nodding, issei does as Rias tells him to do, the young devil holding out his hand and closing his eyes, focusing, closing his eyes and thrusting his left hand into the air, drawing an image of Rias into his mind, issei remembering how they looked the first time he saw them after waking up next to the naked red-haired devil. Sacred gear! Issei shouts, focusing on the image as hard as he can. Something inside of him clicks. Like a switch flipping inside his mind, issei feels something on his back, the object resting over both shoulder blades and the space between. Issei wondering just what is going on as he stands there with his left hand in the air, his hand balled into a fist. All around him the members of the Occult Research Club look on. Like issei, each of them is curious about the oddly shaped white sacred gear that has formed across his back. None of them recognizes the strange shape, the strange accoutrement looking almost like armor, yet it sticks off of issei's back at an angle, several sections on the glowing wings like feathers. The wings themselves are a cyan-like color, an ethereal glow radiating off of them, as though the wings were made of light instead of flesh and bone. Issei's wingspan cuts across the room, the wings furled against the wall, a clear sign that there simply isn't enough room inside the club room to accommodate them. Huh? Issei asks, opening his eyes and looking over his left and right shoulders at the wings thing that is currently attached to him. What is this? Looking on Akino Himejima her head to the side curiously, the vice president and Rias Queen curious as to what kind of sacred gear is just a pair of odd wings. Like Akino, Yudo, Kiba and Kaneko Tuja have no idea what issei's sacred gear is. Kiba has never seen anything like it, and Kaneko doesn't even have a sacred gear, though she knows that they can come in a variety of forms. Only Rias Gremry, heir to the noble devil house of Gremry, and the only full-blood devil in the room, has even the slightest inkling as to what issei's sacred gear is. Blinking, Rias stares at her pawn, everything about issei suddenly making sense. When she'd revived him, issei had needed all 8 of her pawns, meaning that issei should be a powerful devil. When she'd revived Akino, Rias had to choose either her queen or all 8 of her pawns, meaning issei should at least have the same potential as Akino, if not more so. That must be why that fallen angel targeted him. If that sacred gear is what I think it is, then he really is special, and my 8 pawns were well spent. Bucho? Issei asks, referring to her with her title rather than by her name, Rias blinking in surprise when she suddenly finds herself the center of attention of the entire room, every pair of eyes in the room locked upon her. I need to read something, Rias replies, walking around behind her desk, grabbing a book on the shelf there. Issei trails, reaching up and scratching the back of his head in embarrassment, feeling more than a little nervous about Rias suddenly having to find a book. If my sacred gear is that horrible that she doesn't even know what it's called off the top of her head, issei thinks to himself, his contorting in a frown. Setting her book on her desk, Rias opens the tome, the book, a devil encyclopedia of sacred gears, including the 13 Longinus gears that are said to have the power to kill God. Her fingers flipping through the pages, Rias finds the section devoted to the 13 Longinus gears, Rias passing 3 of the 13 before Rias finds what she's looking for. They're dividing the sacred gear that contains the vanishing dragon, Albion. Looking at the entry devoted to the Longinus, Rias reads the description of the sacred gear, the entry talking about how the gear can allow the user to fly, along with the ability to divide another creature's strength in half after the user touches it, the division occurring every 10 seconds. Divine dividing, Rias mumbles, her eyes locked on the page in front of her. Divine dividing? Issei asks curiously, and Rias blinks, her head snapping up. Looking around at all the faces in the room with her, Rias sees issei's curiosity mirrored on the faces of the other members of her peerage. It's one of the 13 Longinus gears, Rias explains. It has the power to divide an opponent's power in half and then absorb that lost energy as its own once every 10 seconds. Blinking, issei's eyes go wide in surprise. So I can just take any opponent's strength from them? Issei asks, a part of him feeling incredibly lucky to have been granted the sacred gear he has. Another part of him, though, understands that what Rias has said is too good to be true, and she had to have forgotten something. You have to touch them first, Rias explains, shaking her head in denial. It also only works on the last creature you touch, meaning if you accidentally touch an ally after touching your enemy, if you use the dividing power, then your ally will be affected. The same is true if your opponent suffers one of your divisions and then sends their subordinate or ally after you. If you touch another creature, then that is one that you'll divide, not necessarily the opponent you want to affect. So I have to be careful, Issei explains, and Rias nods. Especially if you're fighting an opponent that's more than twice as strong as you are. Rias explains to him, if they're that powerful, then even after being divided they'll still be stronger than you, and once they've suffered a division they'll likely know what you can do and use the following 10 seconds to try and beat you before it happens again. She has to explain everything to him. She doesn't want Issei to become overconfident because of his Sacred Gear's ability, which while powerful, does have its limitations. Those limitations become glaringly obvious especially when fighting mole opponents, like during a raiding game, or when fighting a fallen angel and its subordinates. In single combat Issei's Sacred Gear is quite powerful, though once his opponent has fallen for it Issei has essentially won the battle, so long as his opponent is unable to kill him before another 10 seconds pass, or his opponent is more than twice as strong as he is. Rias chooses not to give voice to the thought. The last thing she wants to do is make her newest servant apprehensive. To think I understand, Issei says, his eyes dropping to the floor. Not that you have anything to be depressed about, Rias says, smiling assuredly at her latest servant, closing the book on her desk. It makes sense why that fallen angel would try to kill you now. With your Sacred Gear you could easily kill one of them and are a huge threat to them. Oh, Issei trails, his hands balling into fists. The memory of Yuma murdering him after he'd taken her out on a date is still fresh with him. He can still clearly remember her smirking and talking down to him, telling him that if he was upset he should curse God for giving him the Sacred Gear in the first place. Now though, Issei thinks to himself, with this divine dividing, I could beat her. Starting tomorrow you're going to be going through daily training with me, Issei, Rias says, and Issei blinks, his anger toward Yuma flushed away at Rias' statement. Daily training? Issei asks, and Rias nods. Every morning starting tomorrow I'll be at your house at 5 a.m. and I'll start training you. Rias explains to him. Train? Issei asks, his Sacred Gear disappearing from his back. That's right. Rias explains. Your Sacred Gear will get stronger the stronger you are. Rias continues. Should you absorb too much power your gear will vent it out to prevent it from hurting you. But if you grow stronger and train then your base ability will not only be greater, but you'll be able to absorb more power as well. Oh, Issei trails, and Rias sits down in her chair. Now then, on to business, Rias begins, her tone suddenly brisk and businesslike. Oh, here I goof to pass out flyers again, Issei thinks to himself. XXX. 6 hours later. Rolling his bike up to the apartment building, Issei Hayada parks his bike before getting off, the young devil climbing the steps toward the second-level door Rias told him about. Apparently Kaneko got 2 requests for tonight, and Rias asked him to cover one of them. The first time he'd gotten a request, Issei had run into an otaku who was obsessed with an anime that Issei was also into, and he ended up getting into a heated discussion about it, and then watched a bunch of it before he'd gone home. Approaching the door, Issei pushes the door open, calling out as he does, "Hello? Is anyone home?" Issei calls out, a part of him reminding himself that it's odd that someone would just leave their front door open. At least the creepy otaku kept his door locked. Stepping into the room, Issei calls out, an ominous feeling of dread falling over him as Issei closes the door behind him. Issei looking left and right, searching for some sign of the person who summoned him. "Hello," Issei calls out again. "I'm the devil you summoned from the Grayfia family." No one calling out to him in response, Issei carefully steps into the house, the young devil forgetting to take his shoes off. Issei sticking his head into the living room of the apartment, and what the young man sees there makes him stop and stare. A dead body lies eviscerated on the floor, blood splattered everywhere, as though an entire pool of the stuff has been slopped everywhere. Staring at all the blood, Issei feels like he suddenly stepped into a dream. He's never seen a dead body before, and now standing in the archway in some unknown person's apartment, Issei is seeing his first dead body. Apparently every drop of blood in the sliced and shot corpse drawn out of the body, and then splattered around it. Well, how you doing, shitty devil?" A man's voice shocks Issei out of his delirium, his eyes searching for the source of the voice. Issei seeing a man sitting on the sofa near the corpse, completely laid back and relaxed in spite of the dead body not 5 feet away. Wearing a long coat and dressed in dark clothing, the man wears a grin on a cross around his neck signifying that he has some loyalty toward the church. Pushing off the sofa, the man stands up, completely at ease with the eviscerated body in the room with him. "Who are you and what are you doing here?" Issei asks, taking a half-step back. "Did you do this?" The grin getting wider, a chill runs down Issei's spine at the sight of that expression. "Of course," the man answers without a moment's hesitation. "He was going to make a contract with a shitty devil and deserved to die." "You killed him just for summoning a devil?" Issei asks, not comprehending how a priest could be so callous about committing murder. "Obviously," the man answers. If you even think of forming a contract with a piece of shit devil, then you're subhuman filth. I'm doing these people a favor by killing them before they can do something stupid and get involved with devils. Looking at the man, Issei feels like he's been slapped. Running into Asia and growing up a normal Japanese boy, Issei's only experience with the clergy has always been positive. He's only ever known priests and nuns to be loving and helpful. You're no priest. Issei denies, and the man grins, reaching into his jacket. Like a devil would know what makes a priest. He retorts cynically. Enough talk, shitty devil. My name is Fried Selzen, and I'm the priest that's going to kill you. Pulling a strange gun and a sword hilt from his jacket, Issei narrows his gaze, the young devil about to ask what Fried intends to do when a blade of light shoots out of the sword hilt in his right hand. Seeing that blade, Issei steels himself, drawing on his sacred gear, activating it. Divine dividing. Issei calls out, the wings appearing behind him, Fried blinking in surprise at the sight of the furled wings sticking off of Issei's back. Wings? Fried asks, staring at them a moment. What good are wings going to do you inside, you stupid devil? Balling his hands into fists, Issei knows that he has to actually touch Fried before he can use his power against him. If Fried can immobilize him, and then chop him up, Issei is as good as dead. How about this? Issei demands, jumping forward, moving as fast as he can, pulling his fist back as he crosses the distance between them, driving his fist into Fried's jaw with all the strength Issei can must. Ha! Issei calls out, punching the man. Unfortunately for Issei, he only recently became a devil, and physically isn't much stronger than a normal human being. Seeing Fried stumble slightly from his blow, Issei jumps back, his wings allowing him to slide through the air, in spite of the fact that they're furled behind him. Issei landing on his feet as though it's second nature. That all you can do, shitty devil? Fried smiles, turning his head back toward Issei, his curled away from his teeth in a predatory smile. I'm going to enjoy killing you. Fried raising his gun, Issei steels himself. Come on, do it, Issei thinks to himself, not sure how to use his divine dividing's power to have his opponent's strength. Divide! A strange voice comes from the wings on his back, Fried blinking in surprise, his gun faltering in his outstretched hand. While Fried mumbles, feeling like he's just been through a workout, the priest blinking in surprise at the sudden exhausted feeling hitting him. Feeling Fried's strength surging into him, Issei feels like $1 million. He's never felt better in his life. Like he's on a sugar rush, every part of him feeling alive and charged, as though every part of his body were brimming with power. Why you, Fried mumbles, focusing on his gun hand, steadying his hand as he takes aim at Issei. Moving instinctually, Issei shifts to his left, Fried pulling the trigger as the gun goes off. His shot aimed at Issei's face, the bullet goes wide, the shot cleanly missing and striking the wall. Not feeling so strong? Issei asks, and Fried growls, shifting his gun, pointing it toward Issei. Don't talk down to me, you shitty devil. Fried growls, squeezing the trigger. Trying to dodge another bullet, Fried doesn't stop with just one. Instead, the priest fires his gun several times, the shots largely disorganized. Issei unable to dodge all of them, one of the bullets grazing his left arm, a second shot hitting him in the right thigh. Feeling a spike of burning pain, Issei's face contorts in agony, his blood spurting from the wound as the bullet rips through his body and then goes out the other side. Issei grunting in pain, both hands grasping at the wound as 10 seconds tick by. Divide! The voice says again, and Fried again feels like he's been kicked in the gut, his remaining strength cut in half. Fried feels like he's just finished running a marathon, the man exhausted, barely able to stand. What have you? Fried mutters, stabbing his sword into the floor, the priest leaning on the energy sword as the blade itself flickers. Feeling energy flowing into him, Issei can still feel the pain coming from his right thigh, the wound still bleeding even as Issei clutches at the wound. God, that hurts. What the hell kind of bullet hurts a devil like this? Blessed bullet, you shitty devil, Fried explains as though he can hear Issei's thoughts. It burns through your flesh and bone like a hot knife through butter. Clutching at the wound, Issei glares at the priest leaning on his weapon. Opening his mouth to say something, Issei is about to condemn the priest and tell him that he's lost the fight when a woman's scream cuts him off. Issei recognizing the woman's voice from when he ran into her not 3 days ago. Issei-san? Asia's voice calls out to him, both Issei and Fried turning toward the sound, Asia standing near the doorway, her face contorted in confusion. The young blonde nun not sure what is going on as blood flows down Issei's leg. Asia, quick! Help me! Fried calls out to her, motioning toward Issei with his gun hand as he continues. This shitty devil has done something to me and I need your help before he kills me, just like he killed this poor man. His face contorting in outrage, Issei turns his attention back to Fried. You're the one who is responsible for that, not me. Issei denies. Quiet, you shitty devil! Fried shouts back, turning his attention back to Asia. Quick, heal me before he can recover from his wound. Don't listen to him, Asia-chan. Issei entreats her. He's the one who killed this human, and he's trying to kill me. I was sent here because I was summoned. Why would I kill the person who summoned me without even getting them to sign a contract first? Asia hesitates, the young woman not sure how to proceed. Running into Issei, Asia doesn't think he's a bad person. The fact that Issei helped her when she had no idea where she was means a lot to her. He also saw her heal someone and didn't call her a heretic or ostracize her. Instead, he told her that he thought it was a useful power and actually praised her. Are you really a devil, Issei-san? Asia asks in a tiny voice, Issei swallowing the saliva in his mouth, his pain temporarily forgotten. Slowly nodding, Issei can feel a well of shame form in his stomach. I am a devil, Asia-chan, Issei admits. Tu never meant to hide it from you, and I decided that I would never see you again, yet. What are you waiting for, you stupid blonde bimbo? Fried growls at her. Get over here and heal me before. Divide. The voice comes from Issei's wings again, Fried's strength once again flushing out of him like water down a drain. His blade disappearing, Fried falls to floor, his eyes feeling heavy, his entire body feeling like a lead weight. Fried-san, Asia mumbles, moving to try and help him when a red magic circle appears in the space behind Issei. A blonde-haired man jumps out of the circle, a sword in hand. Yodokiba lands in front of Issei, his weapon held in front of him. Omae Akino's voice carries as the vice president of the Occult Research Club strides through the circle. Rias Gremory's queen followed closely by Kaneko and Rias. Everyone, Issei mumbles, surprised by the entire club suddenly showing up. There was a barrier up, so we had no idea something was amiss until just a few minutes ago, Rias explains, looking around the room, taking in the sight of the mutilated body on the floor. Stupid bitch, Fried mumbles, struggling to push himself to his hands and knees. Now we've got a bunch more shitty devils to deal with, and all because you failed to keep the barrier up. Asia mumbles, looking between Fried and Issei, the young woman clearly confused with what's happening around her. Issei, are you hurt? Rias asks, concern her voice as the red-haired princess of Ruin approaches her pawn. Issei momentarily turning his attention to the devil that saved his life. I'll be fine, Bucho. He assures Rias, giving his master a momentary grin. Her gaze pointedly dropping to the growing red stain on Issei's right pant leg. Issei grins, reaching up and scratching the back of his head in embarrassment. Blinking, Kaneko glances up toward the ceiling. Fallen angels incoming. The white-haired rook offers curtly, Rias blinking in surprise at the new information. Fried mumbles, just speaking requiring effort. Looks like the tables have turned now, eh? Kaneko grab Issei, we're leaving. Rias declares, Kaneko nodding as Issei blinks in surprise. What? Issei demands, surprise in his voice as Kaneko moves to him, the white-haired girl scooping him up as though he were a sack of potatoes, slinging him over his shoulder. We can't stay here and fight, Issei. Rias counters. Doing so would serve no purpose and only put all of us in mortal danger for no reason. Akino, Rias addresses her queen. Nodding, the dark-haired woman raises her hands, already well aware what her master intends for her to do. A magic circle appearing. Issei shakes his head in denial. No! We can't leave Asia-chan with them. Issei tries to argue, and Rias shakes her head in denial. Only members of the Gremory family can travel with this circle. Rias denies, and Issei futilely tries to break free. Then leave me here. Let me go. I have to protect her from them. Issei tries to argue, Asia blinking in surprise at his declaration. He's trying to help her, to keep her safe even though he's a devil and several fallen angels are on their way, no doubt to aid her and Fried and kill him and his compatriots. Issei-san, Asia speaks slowly, surprise in her voice at the young man's selflessness, at his willingness to risk his life for someone he hardly knows. Asia. No. Issei denies, reaching out to try and close the distance between them, even as the magical circle rises, transporting the Gremory devils away from the scene. XXX, sitting on a chair naked, Issei can feel Rias pressed against his back, her arms draped around his body. He can also feel a warm feeling all over his body, the feeling strongest on his arm where he'd been grazed and the leg where he'd been shot. To think she's done this with me before. The thought of Rias pressing her naked body against his sends all sorts of thoughts through Issei's mind, though those thoughts are tempered by his own embarrassment. Both of his hands practically smashing against his groin, lest he allow Rias to see his most intimate spot. Yet she slept naked next to me already. There, Rias begins quietly. I've done what I can. Nodding, Issei stands up, leaving the shower stall and closing the curtain behind him. Outside, the other members of the Occult Research Club wait quietly, Kaneko reading a book while Yuto casually leans against the window, his head turned toward the window. The blonde boy looking out the window with a brooding expression. The young man seeming to broadcast the message I'm dark and mysterious that high school girls always seem to eat up. The bullets that stray exorcists used were specially made to kill devils, so you'll need time to recover. Rias explains to him as the shower turns on, the sound of water splashing wafting into Issei's ears. Pulling on a pair of boxers, Issei walks to Love's seat closest to the shower, Akino standing near the two-cushioned sofa with a medical kit in hand. Stray exorcist? Issei asks, his voice tinged with curiosity. Sitting down on the sofa, Akino cracks open the medical kit, Yuto moving away from the wall and walking to the other sofa, speaking as he does. Kaneko seemingly further burying her nose in her book, lest she catch even a glimpse of Issei in his underwear. A bunch of them were kicked out of the church for being too radical. Yuto explains as he sits down across the table from Issei, Akino beginning to wrap a bandage around his arm as Rias turns off the water for the shower. Without many other options, many of them chose to become servants of fallen angels. Soyori saying Asia is like that freed bastard? The sound of water stopping, Issei can hear the curtain being pulled back. Rias answering his question. Whatever that nun is, you are a devil, and she is the servant of a fallen angel. That's just how it is. But Issei mutters, not sure what to say even as Rias takes a seat behind her desk, the red-haired devil clad in only a towel as she does. I'll need some more time with you to fully heal that wound on your leg. Rias explains to him, her tone casual in spite of her extreme lack of clothing, Akino tying the bandage around his arm before standing up, moving to his opposite side to bandage his leg. Okay. Issei agrees quietly, the young man not sure what else to say in response to that. It's because of his own weakness and stupidity that he got hurt in the first place. It doesn't help his dour mood any knowing that he left Asia in the hands of a bunch of fallen angels, the same type of creatures that killed him just because he might have a sacred gear inside of him. Asia already has powers. Unlike Issei, she was able to manifest her ability without first being reincarnated. What are the fallen angels going to do with her? Buchoi, Issei begins, only to have Rias cut her off. If it's about the morning training, you can forget it. As long as your leg isn't fully healed, I'm not going to do anything to exacerbate the injury. We'll wait until you're fully healed to start training. Nodding, Issei swallows the saliva in his mouth, trying to figure out how to properly word what he wants to say, even as he pulls his pants up, closing the clasp and zipping his fly. Buchu about Asia-chan, Issei begins, and Rias shakes her head in denial. You don't have to worry about that nun, Issei. Rias assures him. But Issei continues stubbornly. She's being used by those fallen angels. Who knows what they plan to do with her, exactly? Rias replies matter-of-factly. As long as the fallen angels have a use for her, they won't kill her. Rias continues. Worrying about it won't accomplish anything anyway. The peace that we have in this town is fragile. If I were to attack the fallen angels in their home, it would be tantamount to suicide. Besides, it could start a war, which would cost countless lives, not only your lives but also any humans that unfortunately get caught in the crossfire. Feeling chastised, Issei lowers his gaze. Issei mumbles, not sure what to say. I have contacts in this town, Issei. Rias explains to him. I'll listen, and if one of them tells me that the fallen angels are preparing for something, then I'll consider moving to rescue that nun. Until then, the best thing you can do is focus on recovering. Nodding, Issei quickly bobs his head in agreement. Thank you, Bucho, Issei replies, glad that at least Rias isn't completely denying his request. Unbeknownst to Issei, Rias understands fully just how much he wants to rescue Asia. Issei has repeatedly stated that the two of them are friends, and if one of Rias' friends were in clutches of a bunch of fallen angels, not even her brother would be able to stop her from mounting some sort of rescue. As it is now, though, Issei is injured, and there is no immediate need to rescue the girl since she is in no apparent danger. That doesn't mean I'm going to just let her suffer in the hands of those fallen angels, Rias thinks to herself, already forming the beginnings of plan for when, not if, they mount a rescue. XXX, sitting in the park, Issei sighs, feeling exhausted even though he slept like a rock the night before. Sitting on the bench, Issei's leg still hurts, and the young man can't stop his thoughts from coming back to the blonde woman he left in the clutches of the fallen angels. I wonder if she knows Yuma. If she does, then I wouldn't pass that monster woman to do all sorts of unspeakable things to innocent Asia-chan. Just thinking about it, Issei can clearly picture Yuma in her fallen angel form standing over Asia, the blonde woman tied up while Yuma holds a whip. Asia crying out for mercy while Yuma continues to cruelly and mercilessly whip her, Yuma grinning all the while, the fallen angel reveling in Asia's misery. Blinking, Issei shakes his head back and forth, pushing the image out of his mind. No! I can't think like that. If I'm going to think like that, I need to think about how to rescue her or how to get stronger. Issei-san? A familiar voice wafts into his ears, Issei blinking in surprise at the sound of the woman's voice. Turning around, Asia is standing there, wearing her nun habit and looking at him with curiosity plastered on her features. Asia? XXX. Sitting in a booth of fast food restaurant, Asia stares down at her hamburger, her face betraying the face that she's never had a burger before. Seeing the look on her face, Issei grins, reaching down and picking up his own sandwich. Asia-chan? Issei asks, Asia blinking in surprise. Yes, Asia asks, looking up from her food. You eat it like this, Haim-san. Issei explains, opening his mouth wide and taking a big bite from his cheeseburger. Two never knew people could eat like that, Asia trails, astonishment coloring her tone. Picking up her burger, Asia takes a small bite, chewing the food a moment. It's good. Asia endorses the food, Issei chuckling mirthfully. So how did you end up in the park, Asia-chan? Issei asks casually, the blonde woman blinking before she turns away momentarily, her eyes momentarily clouding over with sadness before the emotion disappears from her gaze. Asia looking back at him happily. Had some time off, so I decided to take a walk around town. Then I saw you, Issei-san, and well, since you've got the day off, why don't we hang out? Issei asks, and Asia smiles at him. Okay. Together, Asia and Issei spend the afternoon together. They go to the arcade, play games, go into a photo booth together, and Issei even wins her a plush doll based off a popular cartoon about battling monsters that live inside small balls. I don't think I've ever had this much fun before, Asia explains, the two of them standing near a small bank of vending machines, a can of soda dropping into the receptacle near the bottom of the machine. I'm glad. Issei replies, bending down to pick up his soda when a spike of pain flares up his leg, Issei winching at the sudden feeling, the pain from his wound intensifying when Issei puts additional weight on the leg. Damn, Issei thinks to himself, the young devil metaphorically biting his tongue. He doesn't want to worry Asia. Watching his body language, Asia can tell that something is wrong with him. It's your leg, isn't it? Asia half asks. It still hasn't healed from yesterday. Frowning, Issei tries to play it off as not being as bad as it really is. It isn't really that bad. Issei denies, and Asia shakes her head in denial. Come with me, Asia says, reaching out and grasping his hand. The blonde nun suddenly filled with purpose. Issei doesn't have it in his heart to argue with her. XXX. The next thing Issei knows, he's sitting at one of many benches that surround a medium-sized man-made pond. Asia kneels in front of him, her hands held over his leg where the bullet passed through him, a soft green light suffusing the wound. After only a few moments the pain is gone, and Issei can't believe it. It feels as though he was never even hurt, his leg feeling like it did before he ever set foot in the apartment. Is that good? Asia asks as the light fades, Issei nodding appreciatively. Yeah. He answers enthusiastically, awestruck by Asia's ability to heal. It feels awesome. To prove his point, Issei stands up, moving his wounded leg up and down, not a flicker of pain on his face as he does so. Seeing him recovered, Asia smiles, the girl standing up as well, her expression seeming to shift to a faraway gaze, Asia's next words accompanied by a forlorn tone. When I was little I was abandoned, left at a church. Asia begins slowly, Issei stopping in his tracks at the sound of Asia's words, the young devil realizing that Asia is telling him about her past. For years I lived there until one night a wounded puppy came into the church. Seeing it I prayed again and again for days with all my heart, and finally a miracle happened. Asia trails, raising her hands to show the pair of rings still on her middle fingers. After it happened the priest said it was a miracle, and they moved me to a much larger church. There they told me to heal the sick and wounded people that traveled there from all over the world to see me. I was very happy. I knew that I was helping people and that my gift really was a blessing. Then one day I saw a man who'd been hurt, and without thinking I helped him. But he wasn't a man, he was a devil. And when the priests found out they called me a sinner and heretic. Realization in his reply. Issei speaks carefully. Sothats, when you decided instead to serve the fallen angels, since you didn't have anywhere else to go? Issei asks, and Asia nods slowly. It's just like Pretty Boy said, where else is someone with a supernatural power to heal going to go? It is, but I really don't like it, Asia replies, her voice breaking. They do so many awful things in the name of God, but I know that this has to be a trial from the Lord. I know that if I endure this He'll grant me what I've always wanted. What you've wanted? Issei asks, and Asia nods, slowly bobbing her head in affirmation. I want to make friends, Asia replies in a small voice. I want to go shopping with them, talk with them, eat with them and do many other things with them, Asia explains, and Issei can't help the feeling of sympathy he feels for the girl. Actually, I'd really be happy with just one friend. Asia, Issei trails, her own eyes looking down at the water, her hands on her lap. Well, we haven't gone shopping yet, but we've ate together, and we've hung out all day, so I'd say that makes us friends. Blinking, Asia looks up at him, her blue eyes cautious and hopeful, the young woman opening her mouth to say something when another voice, a very familiar voice to both issei and Asia, cutting her off. Not going to happen. Raynare's voice cuts into their conversation. The two of them blinking in surprise, both Asia and issei follow the sound back to its source, the fallen angel standing in the middle of the small lake, her feet on the water. Yuma, issei offers in recognition, Asia's own voice showing that they've met, even as issei moves to put himself between the nun and the fallen angel. Raynare-sama, Asia speaks, issei blinking in surprise. Raynare? Is that her real name? So it's true. Raynare begins casually. I'd heard about your descent into devilhood, but I didn't really believe it. Come now, Asia, leave that annoying devil here and return with me. No! Asia denies, shaking her head in denial. I won't go back with you to that awful place. Asia turning her attention to issei. I'm sorry, but I ran away from that church. I know, issei replies, never once taking his eyes off Raynare. Don't worry, Asia-chan, I'll protect you. Blinking, Asia can feel her cheeks flush, a warm feeling filling her stomach at issei's proclamation. You? Raynare asks dubiously. What do you think you can do against me? Or have you forgotten that I already killed you once? Care for another taste? Raynare asks, holding out her hand and forming a spear of light in her right hand. Crap. Divine dividing. Issei calls out, assuming a battle pose like an anime as his wings appear on his back, Raynare blinking in surprise at the sight of them. That's what you had? Raynare asks, staring at it a moment. Word from above was that you had a sacred gear that was dangerous to us, but if that's all it is, just a pair of odd-looking wings, then they must have been wrong. You'll see how dangerous I am. Issei denies, bracing himself, preparing to launch himself at Raynare and try and hit her. If he can't touch her, he can't steal her powers and weaken her. Raynare grins, her spear shooting into Issei's stomach. Feeling incredible pain surging through him, Issei drops to his knees, barely able to even stay remotely upright with Raynare's spear running him through. This hurts. What the hell? I've never felt anything that hurt so bad. Issei-san! Asia cries out, Raynare's spear disappearing. Asia moves next to him, a green glow surrounding the wound. Feeling the pain recede, Issei blinks in surprise. Looking up at her, Issei can feel the last vestiges of pain vanish. Asia-chan, Issei mumbles, not believing how much she's able to heal, and so quickly. Your twilight healing really is impressive, Asia. Raynare praises her, forming another light spear in her hand. Now come with me and return to the church. Finishing with Issei's healing, Asia shakes her head in denial, refusing to acquiesce to Raynare's demands. No. I'm not going with you. Asia denies, and Raynare smirks. All right then, Raynare begins. How about a deal? You come with me, and I won't murder that stupid devil trying to protect you. Both Issei and Asia blink in surprise at Raynare's statement, Issei immediately denying it. No way, she isn't going anywhere with you. Issei denies, Asia feeling that warm feeling fill her again. Issei-san? Her eyes locked on Issei. Asia doesn't see Raynare pull back her hand and toss her spear. Issei watching the fallen angel the entire time, he just reacts, doesn't think. Asia! Issei blurts out, grabbing her and pushing off of the ground, Issei feeling his feet leave the concrete, the two of them rising up into the air. Raynare asks, watching the two of them fly away from the impact point of her spear exploding a moment after it strikes. The two of them flying up and away from the blast zone, Issei and Asia hovering 15 feet in the air, Issei clutching onto her, his face contorting in surprise, Asia blinking before she realizes what is going on. Issei! Asia suddenly grabs hold of him, the nun holding on for dear life while the two of them hover in the air, Issei blinking in surprise at his suddenly being airborne. And flying, Issei mumbles, momentarily awestruck by the thought. Before, when he'd launched himself at Freed, he'd been focused on hitting Freed and killing him. He hadn't even realized that when he'd charged Freed his feet hadn't hit the floor. Never thought that he maybe actually flew. So you can fly, Raynare replies matter-of-factly. Give me Asia and I'll spare you, you worthless low-level devil trash. His grip on Asia tightening ever so slightly, Issei shakes his head no. No, and you won't try and harm me. Issei denies. Stab me or cut me and you'll kill Asia too. Issei explains, and Raynare scoffs in disgust. She can't just kill the girl. If she did just kill Asia, it would destroy her twilight healing, and Raynare wants it more than she wants to hurt Issei. Asia's ability is powerful and rare. Only 2 or 3 people a generation born with the twilight healing sacred gear, and without a means to detect dormant sacred gears in humans, the fallen angels have no idea where the other bearer is, if there is one. Issei, let me go, Asia offers quietly, Issei and Raynare blinking in surprise. What? Asia-chan, what are you saying? Issei stares at her uncomprehending. I don't want you getting hurt because of me. Asia explains. If you died I'd never be able to live with myself, so I'll go with her. Smiling victoriously, Raynare can't believe her luck. There you see? Raynare asks. Asia is a good girl and wants to come with me all her own, so put her down and go away, you low-level trash. Still clutching onto Asia, Issei does not want to just hand her over to the fallen angel. No! Issei denies, shaking his head. I won't let you hurt Asia-chan. She's too good to be hanging around people like you. So what are you going to do? Raynare asks. It isn't as though we're the only people in the world. Are you just going to float there forever, trying to think of something? My comrades will come looking for me eventually, and when they do we'll find a way to pry Asia from you, without hurting her. Blinking, Issei lowers his gaze, his arms still wrapped around Asia, the young devil really not wanting to let the innocent girl go. Bucho, I need to get to Bucho. Then Runa's strange but familiar voice whispers in Issei's mind, Issei blinking in surprise at the suggestion. That voice, Issei mumbles, Raynare's face screwing in confusion. Voice? What voice? Raynare asks, and Asia blinks. Neither she nor Raynare heard anything. Issei mumbles, looking down at Asia. I only have two options. I can run and try to find Bucho, or I can let Asia go and let Raynare do whatever it is she wants with her, or I can try to protect her and probably die in the process. Knowing those are his only real options, Issei makes a split-second decision. Time to go. Turning away from Raynare, the fallen angel blinks in surprise. What are you? Raynare begins, Issei's course of action becoming clear to her as he begins to move away from her during the turn. All right, I need to get to Ku Academy as fast as I can. His wings glowing, Issei feels his sacred gear begin to move, Asia opening her mouth to ask what is going on when the two of them leap forward. Issei and Asia taking off like a bolt of light, a white streak the only trace of the two of them as they disappear into the distance. Shit! Raynare growls, her spear vanishing, the fallen angel realizing that Issei is long gone. She's never seen a creature move that fast. He isn't here, but he'll likely run back to his master. He won't leave town, and we know exactly where his precious master is, so it's only a matter of time. XXX, the world passing by in a blur. The next thing Issei knows, the two of them are hovering Ku Academy, the two of them coming to a stop almost directly above the Occult Research Club building. Seeing that, and hoping that Rias is inside, Issei starts to head toward the ground, Asia blinking in surprise at the sudden change in scenery. Where? Asia asks, turning her head left and right, her expression curious. Don't worry, Asia-chan, you'll be safe here, Issei says, the two of them touching down on the ground, Issei's sacred gear vanishing as he releases Asia from his arms. But Asia mumbles, not wanting to do anything that might cause Issei to be hurt. She truly would prefer to sacrifice herself than allow her first friend to come to harm. Don't worry, Issei says again, taking her hand. Come with me, Bucho will know what to do. XXX, leaning against the front of her desk, Rias Gremory sighs heavily, her entire peerage assembled around her inside the club room. Fortunately it's a Sunday, so there are only a small number of people in the school, and none of them saw Issei's little entrance. She'd only happened to be in the club room, trying to get a handle on what the fallen angels were planning when Issei came into her office, holding the hand of a blonde nun who looks like she's never been more confused. That's what happened. Issei finishes his tale, telling Rias and the rest of the club how he and Asia came to be standing in the club room. Issei. Rias begins slowly. Do you realize what you've done? Blinking, Issei breaks eye contact with her, shame clouding his gaze. Issei trails. I just wanted to protect Asia-chan. Issei explains to them. It was either this or let that fallen angel take her. Exhaling, Rias can understand why Issei would choose to run, but that one single choice has brought all sorts of trouble down upon Rias and her servants. The fallen angels have some sort of interest in Asia, and will undoubtedly come looking for her now that Issei has brought her here. I'm sorry. Asia speaks up, Rias blinking at the nun sudden speaking. I'll go with the fallen angels when they come for me, so no one has to get hurt, Asia offers, and Rias blinks in surprise, Akino, Yuto and Kaneko all mirroring the emotion. That's very noble of you, sister, but I'm not just going to hand you over to those fallen angels. Rias replies, Issei blinking in surprise, happiness playing across his features. Bucho. Issei mutters her title, unable to believe that she's willing to protect Asia from the fallen angels. That's Asia tries to argue, but Rias cuts her off. No member of my family has any love for the fallen angels. Rias explains to the human. Whatever they want with you, we aren't going to just let them have you. Her face falling, Asia is about to try and say something when she looks around the room, seeing Rias' sentiment reflected in the faces of the other devils in the room. They're willing to protect me even though I'm nothing to them, Asia thinks to herself, wishing that she had friends like these. Bucha, what are we going to do? Issei asks, and Rias pushes off her desk, standing straight. While we aren't the only devils involved with this school, we can't really expect any help from the other group, Rias replies, Issei blinking in surprise. You mean there are other devils in the school besides the Occult Research Club? We're on our own, Kaneko says matter-of-factly, her tone flat. Nodding, Rias doesn't argue that point. However, we also have the advantage. Rias explains. The fallen angels have to come to us to take her, meaning we can fortify ourselves and make it as difficult as possible for them to assault us. How will we do that? Issei asks, and Rias smiles at him, the expression sending chills down Issei's spine for some unknown reason. XXX, 7 hours later. This really isn't necessary, Issei-san, Asia explains to him. I don't want you risking your life for me. Standing in the school gymnasium, Issei has his divine dividing out, the wings furled behind him with Asia nearby, the large open gym empty save for the two of them, the pair standing near the door on the opposite side of the building as the front of the building, where Rias and the rest of the Occult Research Club wait. I am not going to just hand you over to those fallen angels, Asia-chan. Issei explains, shaking his head. Besides, you heard Bucho's plan, we're going to win. Her gaze distraught, Asia lowers her eyes, her hands clasped together in front of her. The blonde woman doesn't want anyone to get hurt because of her. Seeing Issei and the other devils of the ORC, Asia now knows what it looks like to have friends, to have precious people that will put their lives on the line for each other. More than anything else, Asia wishes that she'd been born a devil in the Gremory family rather than a human. If she were, she would have a sister like Rias, and a family that cares. Asia mumbles, not really sure what she wants to say. Don't worry. Issei assuages her, giving her a thumbs up. We'll beat those fallen angels and then you'll be free. You can make friends and do all the things you've ever wanted to without having worry about those damn things. Asia mumbles, pressing her hands together. I'd be happy if I could just be with you, Issei-san. Issei begins, about to say something to her when the doors on the opposite side of the gym burst open. At the same time, both Issei and Asia turn toward the sound and movement, the doors slamming against the interior walls, Raynare standing in the doorway in her fallen angel form, the sound of explosions, lightning and things being smashed coming in through the doorway. Balling his hands into fists, Issei puts himself between Asia and Raynare, the fallen angel casually walking into the gym, and toward them, the woman clearly in no big hurry to get closer to them. She's probably just trying to make us sweat. Remember, stay calm. His knuckles white, Issei keeps his eyes on Raynare, opening his wings to their full span, preparing to take to the air. Well, Raynare begins, casually striding toward them. You've certainly made yourself to be quite the pain in my ass. A light spear forming in her hand, Raynare glares at Issei. Where looks capable of murder, Issei would be struck dead at that moment. I told you already, I'm not letting you hurt Asia. Issei replies, an angry growl escaping Raynare's. Jesus Christ, you're like a broken record. All you ever say is I won't let you hurt her, or I'm going to protect her. Raynare growls at him. You're the most annoying low-class devil piece of shit I've ever met. His hands balled into fists, Issei doesn't flinch, the young devil standing his ground, in spite of the fallen angel's proximity. You know what? Raynare begins. I think I'm not going to kill you. I'm going to beat you to a pulp, and when you're nothing but a pile of broken bones, I'm going to make you watch as my friends slaughter all your precious devil friends, starting with that red-haired bitch you call Master. Grinning, Issei doesn't cower at Raynare's threat. I think you're the one who's going to end up a pile of broken bones. Issei replies. After all, my Bucho is the red-haired princess of destruction, Rias Gremory. Issei reminds the fallen angel. Outside, Issei can hear the sound of Rias using her magic, an explosion following shortly thereafter. Not to mention her right hand, Issei continues. Her queen and the priestess of thunder and lightning and a super sadist Akino Himejima. At that moment thunder cracks, Akino laughing joyously as lightning rains down. Not to mention her knight, the pretty boy Yudo Kiba, knight of the sword and expert demon sword wielder. What kind of shitty sword is that? Freed's voice carries, Yudo replying casually. This is my sword, Holy Eater. It consumes light and holy power. Inside the gym, Raynare scowls, clearly displeased with how the battle fares outside. Next is the rook Tuja Kaneko. While she may be small, she packs quite the punch. Issei explains, the sounds of men being hit and sent flying repeatedly wafting into the gym. And last but not least, me, her pawn Issei Hayadu, super pervert and future harem king. Issei introduces himself, striking a pose. Standing there, a sweat drop forms on Raynare's head, the fallen angel looking at Issei skeptically. Hearing his introduction, Asia has no idea what he's talking about. Growing up in the church, Asia has no idea what a pervert or a harem is. So Raynare begins slowly, not knowing whether issei is being serious or not. You're just a pawn and you expect to stand against me? Dropping his pose, issei stands up straight, his sacred gear still on his back. I may be just a pawn right now, but you'll find that pawns are the most dangerous of all. Issei begins. XXX, 1 hour prior. Our strategy is going to hinge on you, issei, Rias explains. And issei breaks eye contact with her, guilt coloring his tone. I'm just your pawn, Bucho, issei replies carefully. Just release me from your family, and I'll take Asia-chan and run. You don't have to risk your life for me. I'm just a worthless pawn after all. Blinking, Rias gives issei a hard look, the president of the Occult Research Club clearly displeased with issei's statement. I told you once that reincarnated devils have the same powers as the chess pieces they're named after. Rias explains. But a pawn is by far not the weakest piece. How? Issei blinks, not comprehending what Rias means. I'm not strong like Kaneko-chan, fast like Kiba, or powerful like Akino-senpai, so what good am I to you? Promotion. Rias replies, and issei blinks in surprise. Promotion? Issei asks and Rias nods. That's right. When a pawn gets deep into enemy territory, they are allowed to promote into any other piece other than the king. Rias explains to him. So, for example, if I were to designate, say, the school gym as enemy territory, then all you have to do is get there, and you can promote into any other piece. XXX, present. What are you talking about? Raynare demands, her patience wearing thin. A pawn is just a pawn, a worthless foot soldier, a throwaway piece. Then you obviously don't know anything. Issei denies. A real master has no throwaway pieces. Promotion, Rook. Issei thinks to himself, feeling something inside him shift with the thought. Just standing there, Issei knows that he's changed, that the promotion has already taken effect. Try this. Issei calls out, jumping forward, taking off toward Raynare. Grinning, Raynare pulls her arm back, throwing the spear with pinpoint aim, her strike flying straight toward Issei. Holding out his right hand, Issei runs into the spear head-on, Issei stopping in his tracks, a small barrier forming between him and the spear, sparks radiating off the point of impact, Issei gritting his teeth, the skin of his hand already feeling like it's starting to burn, even though he isn't even touching the spear yet. Divide! The wings pulse, and Issei feels energy surge into his body, strength filling him, restoring him. So you've resorted to leeching strength from your allies now? All in a desperate attempt to keep yourself alive? Raynare goads. It doesn't matter how much strength you take from your friends, you're just making it easier for my subordinates to kill them. You wish, Issei mumbles, trying to fight against the spear burning his right arm. Try all you want, you can't destroy my spear. Light is poison to a devil, no matter how strong you are. Hovering there, his right arm grinding against the spear of light, Issei tightens his jaw. I can't fail, I have to win for Asia. Struggling against the spear, Issei pushes back, trying desperately to throw the spear aside and hit Raynare. I am going to protect Asia. I'm going to protect her, and I'm going to make this woman pay for trying to kill me. His feelings surging inside of him, Issei hears a voice call out to him from the sacred gear. English Dragon Power Gift. The sacred gear speaks, and Issei blinks in surprise, not knowing what's going on as white light covers his entire body. Power Gift. Raynare blurts out, staring in surprised shock as the white light begins to fade. What the hell is that? The light disappearing, Issei now wears a suit of white armor with blue jewels. Inside the armor, Issei feels like he's on top of the world, like he can move mountains. Looking at him, Asia s in a sharp breath of surprise. Seeing him covered in light and now clad in white armor, Asia is struck with the sudden image of an angel, as though Issei were her own personal guardian angel, ready to fight against anyone that would threaten her. Issei-san, Asia whispers, her hands held together near her, her eyes wide in awe. I am possible. Raynare stares in shock, the spear pressing against Issei's gauntlet palm. Divide! The voice calls out, the light from the spear fading. Issei not feeling the familiar rush of energy that he normally feels when his sacred gear drains the energy from an opponent. Why did that happen? I didn't order the sacred gear to use its power, so why? For just a moment Issei is allowed to contemplate that before a voice speaks in his mind. Hurry, boy! Don't you want your revenge? The voice from before goads Issei on, reminding him of what's happening. I don't know what this is, or what's going on, but I'm not going to waste this. Issei declares, flinging his right hand to the side. The spear shatters, disappearing in a small flash of light. The spear no longer impeding him, Issei shoots forward, the young devil like a freight train, and Raynare stands right in his path. Wait! Raynare cries out, fear on her face as Issei crosses the distance between them, drawing his left hand back. Take this. Issei roars, driving his left hand forward like a battering ram, slamming his left fist into Raynare's jaw, the fallen angel flying backward from the impact. Raynare crashing through the far side of the gym. Issei stands there, momentarily clad in the strange white armor before his body shines again. The armor disappearing along with the light, the sacred gear disappearing as well. His world spinning. Issei drops to his hands and knees, the young devil feeling like he's the one that's just been beaten. Feeling exhausted, Issei's in air, trying to fill the seemingly perpetual feeling of emptiness in his lungs. Issei-san! Asia calls out, Issei about to raise his head when suddenly he feels his arm being pulled up. Good job, Haida-kun. Kiba praises him, the blonde boy draping Issei's right arm across his shoulders as he helps Issei up. Kiba, Issei mutters, footsteps drawing Issei's attention. Good work, Issei. Rias praises him as she walks into the room, her uniform slightly ruffled from the fight outside. Bibucho, Issei mumbles, not sure what exactly is going on as Rias approaches him. The fallen angels are dead, though that stray priest managed to escape. Rias explains to him, her gaze shifting to Asia. Are you hurt? Shaking her head no. Asia mumbles a negative, Rias relieved that the human girl wasn't hurt during the battle. I'm fine, Raynare-sama never even touched me. Nodding, Rias turns her attention back to Issei. Good, what about you, Issei? How do you feel? Tired, Issei mutters, feeling like he's just run a marathon. Though your plan worked, Bucho. XXX, 30 minutes earlier. Standing in the clubroom, Issei is alone with Rias, the red-haired president of the Occult Research Club, having already sent the rest of the club and Asia off to the gym to prepare for the fallen angels' attack. Rias has already informed them what their general battle plan will be, their strategy being to lure the fallen angels to an area where they can battle without fear of collateral damage, but also where they can safely store Asia away from the battle. Bucho and everyone else are going to be waiting outside the gym while I'm supposed to wait inside with Asia as her personal guard. But I don't understand what else she needs to talk to me about alone. Bibucho, Issei begins awkwardly, Rias sitting behind her desk, the last member of the club leaving just over 5 minutes prior. Knock, knock. The sound of someone gently tapping their fist against the club door is surprisingly loud to Issei, the young man starting in surprise at the sudden sound. Who could that be? Come in. Rias calls, the doorknob turning, the door opening, revealing a pair of teenagers wearing the Co-Academy uniform. That's the Student Council President Sauna Torai and the Vice President Tsubaki Shinra. Why? Issei mumbles, confused as to why the Student Council would be at school this late, and why Rias would want them here when fallen angels will soon be here. Greetings, Rias. Sauna offers politely, Rias standing up from behind her desk and walking out, smiling at the bespectacled dark-haired girl. Greetings, Sona. Rias replies warmly, Issei blinking in surprise. Sona? Issei asks, and Rias answers him. Issei, this is Sona Citri and Tsubaki Shinra. They're both part of the other group of devils that operate out of the academy that I mentioned earlier. Rias explains, and Issei blinks, understanding settling on his gaze. Sauna Torai is my alias while I am attending here. Sona explains to him. My real name is Sona Citri, though please refrain from using it in front of any normal students. Nodding, Issei doesn't say anything, the young pawn choosing to stay quiet, so Rias begins. I take it you're here to respond to my offer? Offer? Issei thinks. What offer? That's right. Sona answers, addressing Rias. What offer? Issei asks, and Rias smiles at him. I asked Sona to allow us to borrow her queen's power during the upcoming battle. Rias explains, and Issei blinks in surprise. Borrow her power? Issei asks, and Rias nods, Tsubaki's face chiseled from stone for all the emotion it shows. That's right. Sona affirms again, her voice stoic. Rias has asked me to allow you to absorb my queen's power with your divine dividing sacred gear. Blinking, Issei turns his head toward Rias. You told her about my sacred gear? Issei asks, and Rias nods. Of course. Rias replies. Your sacred gear's ability to divide another creature's strength in half and then add it to your own is incredibly powerful. But in this battle you might not be able to touch your opponent before needing a boost in power. If you touch Tsubaki with your sacred gear active and keep it active until after the battle, you'll be able to divide her power and add it to your own, something the fallen angels won't be suspecting, and it could give you the edge you need to defeat your opponent. I see. Issei trails thoughtfully, so Rias begins, turning her attention back to Sona. Do we have an agreement? Staring at Rias, Sona's face is an impassive, emotionless mask, Issei wondering just how Rias knows the robot-like student council president. She's considered to be the third most attractive girl in school after Rias and Akino, though Issei doesn't know anything else about her. She along with the rest of the members of the student council tend to keep to themselves. We do. Sona answers, and Rias smiles at her friend. Thank you, Sona. Rias offers warmly, and Issei blinks in surprise. Why are you agreeing to something like this? Why don't you just help us in defeating these fallen angels? Issei asks, and Sona rounds her gaze on him, the look on her face making Issei suddenly feel like a 5-year-old with his hand caught in the cookie jar. You have brought the attention of these fallen angels upon yourselves. If you wish to risk your lives protecting a former sister of the church, then that is your choice. But I am not going to risk the lives of my family for something that has nothing to do with me. Sona explains to him. That said, no devil has any love for any fallen angel, and if my assistance in this manner will aid you and Rias in killing a few of them, then so long as the lives of my people aren't at risk, I'm willing to help. XXX, present. With that, he brought out his sacred gear and shook hands with Tsubaki. After that, Issei made his way to the gym. Rias walking with him. Issei was infinitely glad that the school is deserted. Were a normal human to see him with a pair of giant light wings on his back, they would likely start asking questions that would be difficult to answer. Good, I'm sure gaining strength without actually touching Raynare was quite the surprise for her. That power and the promotion are the only reasons you were even able to wear the armor. A familiar voice whispers in Issei's ears. What? Issei mumbles, his eyes going wide at the voice in his head. Opening her mouth to answer Issei, Rias stops before she begins, the far look in Issei's eyes telling her that he isn't speaking to her. You asked for power, and I gave it to you. Unfortunately for you, your body could only handle that strength for a scant few moments before I had to take it back. Fortunately, it was long enough for you to get satisfaction against that creature that nearly killed us. Who are you? Issei whispers. I am the Vanishing Dragon Albion, and I reside inside your sacred gear. It is my armor that you were wearing when you defeated that fallen angel. It was me that told you to flee when you faced her before. Issei mumbles, Yudo, Asia and Rias watching him, none of them quite sure what is going on with their newest member. Listen well, the Red One will come eventually, and when he does you must be stronger if you're going to defeat him. Red One? Issei asks aloud, both Asia and Yudo looking to Rias, their expressions curious, but the red-haired devil simply shrugs her shoulders, clueless as to what Issei is talking about. His eyes seeming to come back into focus. Albion doesn't reply to Issei. Instead, his mind is filled with only his own thoughts again. Rias speaking slowly and carefully. Issei, you alright? Rias asks, genuine concern in her voice. Blinking, Issei looks up at her, giving the president a reassuring smile. Yeah, I'm fine, just a little exhausted. Issei tries to assuage her, opening her mouth to ask who Issei was talking to. The question has yet to form on Rias when Kaneko calls from the open gym door. I'm back. Her voice carries Rias, Yudo, Issei and Asia all turning toward her to watch as Kaneko drags Raynare's body back into the gym. Well, Rias begins, putting her back to Issei to face Raynare as Kaneko unceremoniously tosses the still-breathing fallen angel onto the ground at Rias' feet. Look what the cat dragged in. For a moment no one talks, a sweat drop forming on Yudo, Issei and even Kaneko. Bucket Hat was a bad joke. Raynare groaning in pain, the fallen angel pushes herself up to her hands and knees, looking up at Rias as the red-haired princess of ruin begins to glow with dark power. My servant didn't finish you, so I thought I would do you the honor of finishing you myself. Rias begins, her power forming around her hands. Blinking, Raynare knows that she is in no shape to fight, that her only hope of saving her own life lies in convincing Rias to spare her. Issei-kun, a very familiar voice reaches his ears. Issei blinking in surprise to see Raynare now looking like Yuma, his gift to her still tied on her left wrist. Issei-kun, please don't let her kill me. Issei's gaze wavering. Yudo narrows his eyes, the fact that Issei is leaning on him heavily the only thing stopping Kiba from drawing his sword. Please, Issei-kun, Raynare pleads with him. I really did treasure our time together, and I never meant to hurt you. I only did that because I was told to. See? Yuma asks, holding up her left hand and the bracelet there. I really did enjoy our date together. I even kept this because I love you. His gaze wavering, Issei looks away from Yuma, his voice gravelly and low as he replies. I would have treated you like a queen. Issei begins quietly. You were my first girlfriend. I spent days planning our date. I would have bent over backwards for you, but instead you betrayed me. Issei closes his eyes, the motion seeming to take much of what remains of his strength, his own voice coming out as a small plea as he continues. Byoka, please finish it. Two don't have the strength. Her countenance darkening, the energy around Ria's hands grows, Raynare realizing in that brief moment that she's going to die. Are you sure, Issei? Rias asks. Wouldn't you rather have her as a harem slave? Blinking, Issei looks back to Rias, the red-haired devil looking at him curiously. Issei opening his mouth curiously. Slave? Issei asks weakly, and Raynare feels a pit of dread form in her stomach. That's right. Rias explains to him. You can bind this fallen angel to you. It isn't normally done, since usually only high-class devils can do it, but since you're the White Dragon Emperor, you shouldn't have a problem. How? Issei asks, still leaning heavily on Kiba. Neither Kiba nor Kaneko knows how to feel about following with Ria's suggestion. Neither of them has any love for fallen angels, though the thought of humiliating one of them by making them a slave does have its own twisted draw. Her aura fading, Rias walks over to where Issei stands, Rias reaching out, grasping the hilt of Kiba's sword, Rias drawing the blade from its sheath. All you have to do is have her drink your blood. Rias explains. My blood? Issei asks, and Rias raises the sword, the point now pointing up toward the ceiling. Hold out your hand, Issei, and I'll cut it. Once your blood is on the sword, I'll make her lick it, and then she'll be bound to you as a slave. She'll have to do whatever you want her to do, when you want her to do it. Issei trails, not sure what to say as he holds out his hand. Rias touching his hand with her left hand, Rias presses the sword against Issei's palm, Kiba's blade slicing into Issei's flesh. Asia winching at the sight of the sword piercing Issei's flesh, the young devil gritting his teeth at the pain that flares through him. Blood on the blade. Rias turns away from Issei, Raynare still on her hands and knees, her eyes going wide in shock as Rias walks over toward her. Holding the blood-stained blade out for Raynare to lick, Rias glares down at Raynare. The fallen angel staring at the sword. Raynare's eyes flicker between Rias and the sword. Drink the blood, fallen angel, or I'll kill you. Her voice is cold. Rias staring down at the fallen angel. The beaten woman swallowing. Raynare stares at the sword, feeling conflicted. She doesn't want to die. She most definitely doesn't want to die. But on the other hand, she doesn't want to spend the rest of her life as some annoying devil's slave. Rias glowing with dark power. Raynare swallows the saliva in her mouth, feeling like she's been caught between a rock and a hard place. On one hand I die. On the other hand I'll live. Opening her mouth, Raynare sticks out her tongue, pressing it against the blood-stained section of the sword. Raynare slowly drags her tongue along the side of the sword. Swallowing the blood on her tongue, Raynare closes her eyes, feeling a strange, uncomfortable feeling flowing down her throat. Her face contorted in disgust. Raynare doesn't say anything. Issei, on the other hand, doesn't feel anything for a moment after Raynare swallows his blood. Then Issei feels a jolt of electricity flare inside his body, like being struck by a bolt of lightning. Gah! Issei cries out in pain, Asia blinking in surprise. At the same time, Raynare feels the surge of current, as though lightning were coursing through her veins, burning her from the inside out. Screaming in pain, Raynare doubles over, feeling the pain surging through her even as Issei succumbs to the sensation. Issei-san! Asia cries out his name, the young blonde's voice mixing with Raynare's scream. The sound's the last thing Issei hears before he is off to unconsciousness. Master, a familiar voice wafts into Issei's ears. Master, feeling his head on something soft, Issei opens his eyes, momentarily wondering where he is as his eyes come into focus, taking in the familiar sight of the ceiling of the Occult Research Club, and the not-so-familiar sight of Yuma looking down at him, a worried smile on her face. Fallen angel! Not remembering everything that happened before he passed out, Issei scrambles away from Yuma, the White Dragon Emperor practically jumping off of the sofa and to his feet. Yuma watching him get to his feet, Issei's fear clear as he stares at Yuma sitting on the sofa, her expression curious. Master? Yuma asks, Issei blinking in surprise at her referring to him with such respect, her tone like when she'd originally asked him out on a date, back when Issei had been blissfully ignorant. Issei mutters, his stance relaxing. Master? Sitting on the sofa, Yuma appears as she did when Issei first met her, save for the fact that she's now dressed in the girl's uniform for Ko Academy. Would you prefer if I referred to you differently? Yuma asks, and Issei breaks eye contact with her, feeling uncomfortable carrying out a casual conversation with the woman who tried to murder him. Just call me Issei, Issei replies, and Yuma nods. As you wish, Issei-sama. Yuma replies. Still not looking at her, Issei can't shake the discomfort the young devil feels festering in his stomach. Why are you talking to me like that? Issei asks, and Yuma blinks in surprise. Why wouldn't I speak to you like this? Yuma asks, slowly standing up. You saved my life. Every day I'm alive now I owe to you. But Issei mutters, remembering everything that happened before he passed out. You're my slave now. Nodding, Yuma doesn't deny Issei's statement. I am your slave, Issei-sama. Yuma admits freely. I will do anything you ask me to do without question. Hearing her admitting to it, Issei doesn't feel the surge of joy and happiness he thought he'd feel hearing a beautiful woman say that. Being a teenage boy with a raging libido, Issei has always dreamed of actually having a slave like in the Arrow games he plays on his computer late at night after his parents go to bed. Talking with his two friends, Issei always thought he would revel in having a beautiful, big-head woman to do whatever he wanted with. Really? Issei half asks, his discomfort and disbelief coloring in his tone. Give me an order, Issei-sama. Yuma replies, and Issei blinks in surprise. Let me grope your? Issei replies. Not knowing if she'll agree, Issei very nearly falls over in surprise when Yuma starts walking toward him. Covering the distance between them in a moment, Yuma reaches out, ever so gently taking his hand in hers, raising it up to her chest and then pressing it against her. Holy mother of! His fingers against her soft bosom, Issei unconsciously curls his fingers around her flesh, softly squeezing Yuma's right. A small wafts out of her, Yuma's face contorting in shame, and as Issei ever so slowly gropes her. Oh Kami, she's letting me squeeze her. Feeling a small amount of blood escaping his nose, Yuma looks away from him, her voice tinged with embarrassment. Are you satisfied with this, Issei-sama? Yeah, Issei mumbles, completely engrossed by the fact that he's actually groping a woman's, and she isn't trying to bash his head in as a result. Her fingers falling from his, Issei lowers his hand, Yuma turning her head back toward him. Do you have any other orders, Issei-sama? Yuma asks, and Issei feels torn. Part of him wants to tell her to take off her clothes and let him bury his face in her. Another part of them, though, is more than a little uncomfortable with the prospect of doing anything with the woman who betrayed and tried to kill him. No, Issei shakes his head, turning his gaze away from her. How long was I unconscious? For roughly 6 hours. Yuma explains to him. Ria-sama thought it was best that you remain here until you regained consciousness. So she just let the fallen angel that betrayed me and tried to kill me carry me back to the club room, alone? What about Asia-chan? Issei asks. Ria-sama had me carry you back here before she spoke with Asia-san. Yuma explains to him. Neither she nor Ria-sama has returned here since then. Frowning, Issei sighs, feeling a modicum of relief. With the fallen angels dealt with, Asia will be free to do whatever she wants. With her healing ability, she could do untold amounts of good in the world, helping people without anything to do with the church. A part of Issei hopes that Asia goes out into the world and enjoys her life. Another part of him, though, is sad that he'll likely never see her again. Are you distressed, Issei-sama? Yuma asks, and Issei blinks in surprise, his head snapping back to her. How? Issei mumbles, not sure how to phrase what he wants to ask her. I'm your slave. Yuma answers him. Your blood flows inside me, connecting me to you. Opening his mouth to reply, Issei doesn't know what to say to that. Instead, the young devil simply allows his mouth to hang open a moment before closing his mouth again. And you're all right with that? Issei asks. You hated me, even tried to kill me. Issei continues. Now you're speaking to me like you care about me. Her face contorting in a frown, Yuma looks down toward the floor. Before I drank your blood, I did feel that way, Yuma explains to him. But when I swallowed your blood, it hurt so much. Then when the pain faded and I saw you hanging there unconscious, I felt so worried. Hearing her explaining what happened after he passed out, Issei doesn't know what to think. For him, the change in Raynare is such a stark shift that he doesn't know how it's even possible. To him, Raynare went from wanting to chop his head off to ready to take his virginity if he asked her to. So what now? Issei asks. Blinking, Yuma looks up at him, her head to the side curiously. What do you mean, Issei-sama? Yuma asks. Mentally smacking himself, Issei balls his hands into fists. I mean, what are you planning to do now? Issei asks. Yuma begins slowly. I'd like to stay by your side. The implications of that hitting Issei like a ton of bricks. Issei stares at Yuma, shock playing across his features. You mean like at my house? Issei asks, and Yuma nods. I'd like to share your bed as well, if I can, Yuma replies demurely, Issei momentarily envisioning Yuma in lingerie lying next to him, the girl wearing a black see-through teddy that barely hides her body. Issei giggles, his hands unconsciously rising, Issei making a groping motion with his hands, Issei hearing Yuma in his mind. Ravish me, Issei-sama. Issei hears the words in his head. Issei-sama? Yuma asks, her voice snapping Issei out of his delusion, Issei quickly shaking his head to clear it. I'm fine. Issei assures her, half turning away from her. If you want to have with me, I don't mind. Yuma replies, and Issei falls face first on the floor. Issei-sama. Yuma moving to see if he's all right. Issei pushes himself up to his hands and knees, Issei mumbling as he does. Ow me face, Issei complains. I'm so sorry, Issei-sama. Yuma's voice reaches his ears, Issei feeling a pair of arms grasp him by the shoulders before his face is pressed against something soft and warm. For just a moment Issei has no idea what is going on. Then the realization hits him that Yuma is holding his face against her. Unable to believe what is happening, Issei is about to start moving his head back and forth when the door to the hall opens, the sound of Ria's voice carrying, Issei Urias trails, taking in the sight of Issei with his head buried in Yuma's chest. Oh, my Akino speaks up. You're a fast mover, aren't you, Issei-kun? Issei, and a very familiar voice calls out to him, the sound of her voice flushing any perverted thoughts out of Issei's mind. Asia. Issei pulling back Yuma allows him to stand up, the fallen angel in human form watching her master scramble to his feet, Issei turning toward Rias, Akino and Asia. This isn't what it looks like. Issei tries to explain, taking in the sight of the frown on Rias, the curious look on Asia's face, and the grin on Akino's. So you weren't just about to bury your face in your slaves? Rias asks sarcastically, and Issei grins uncomfortably, reaching up and scratching the back of his head in embarrassment. That's Issei mumbles, not sure how to respond to Ria's summary of the situation. Issei-sama fell because of me. Yuma comes to Issei's defense. I was just trying to comfort him. Sure, Rias replies sarcastically. Anyway, now that you're both awake, we can finally explain the current state of things. Akino closing the door to the hall, Rias walks toward her desk, the red-haired devil leaning against it as every other pair of eyes in the room follow her. The state of things? Issei asks, and Rias nods. The battle with the fallen angels went well, but things have changed as a result. Rias explains to him, you enslaved the fallen angel Raynare, and Asia Argento has asked to join my family. Blinking, Issei turns his gaze to Asia, the White Dragon Emperor, only now noticing that Asia now wears the girl's uniform of Ko Academy, like Rias and Akino and Yuma. You want to be a devil, Asia-chan? Issei asks, and the blonde nun bobs her head in affirmation. Yes, she answers, looking at Issei a moment before Rias speaks, once again drawing the attention of the room to her. Asia has become my second bishop. Rias explains. Both she and your slave have asked to live with you, Issei. Blinking, Issei's face falls in disbelief. Both of them living with me. There's no way my parents would go for that. But my parents! Issei replies, and Rias smiles at him. I can handle them. Rias replies. The real question is, do you want them both living with you? Rias asks. Blinking, Issei lowers his gaze, a somber looking settling in his eyes. They're both only involved with me because I was too weak, Issei thinks to himself. If I were stronger, I could have just killed Raynare and saved Asia before I put everyone else in danger. Yes, Issei agrees. If that's what they both want, then who I am to say no? Then it's settled then. Rias agrees, both Asia and Raynare feeling relief wash over them with Issei's agreement. Neither of them wants to be away from him. Though both of them have their own reasons for wanting to do so. Raynare wants to make him happy, and if that means sharing his bed and fulfilling his perverted desires, then she will gladly do it. Asia, on the other hand, doesn't trust Raynare with Issei, and Issei is her first friend. No one has ever treated her like Issei has, and she wants to be around him more. Well, once school ends, we'll go back to your house and arrange things. Rias explains, Issei sighing heavily. Oh, yippee! XXX. Sitting in his homeroom class, Issei sits with his right elbow on the desk, his face falling into his open palm. Why me? In front of the class, both Asia and Yuma stand next to one another, their names written behind them on the board, identifying both of them. Class, this is Asia Argento and Yuma Amano. They'll both be transferring and starting today. The teacher introduces them both. Check it out. Matsuda can barely remain in his seat. A blonde beauty and a brunette with big. Ever since Issei regained consciousness, Raynare's human form has had much larger than when he'd first met her. While Raynare's are larger, they're much more pronounced than they were before, and Issei has no idea why she would change. What I wouldn't give to bury my face in their bosom and just motorboat them both at the same time. Motohama comments, and Issei can't bring himself to join in. Sighing, Issei just closes his eyes, wishing that this day would just end. Issei Matsuda speaks up, turning his attention toward the young devil. Why aren't you staring? You love big-head girls. Suspicion coloring his friend's tone, Issei pulls his head from his hand tiredly. I'm just really tired today, Matsuda. Issei replies. Sensei, would it be possible if I could sit next to Haida, Issei? Yuma asks, and Motohama blinks in surprise. Yo, Issei, why is she asking to sit next to you? Motohama asks, and Issei drops his head back into his hand. None of this isn't happening. Me too. Asia speaks up quickly. I want to sit next to Issei-san too. Kill me now. XXX. Getting through school is like walking through a minefield. Both Asia and Yuma integrate rather easily, the girls of the class welcoming them happily, while many of the guys in the class try to ask one or both of them out. Being a blonde, Asia has an exotic draw, since not many Japanese girls have blonde hair. On the other hand, Yuma also receives her fair share of male attention, her and more traditional appearance likely attracting potential suitors. Then Asia said that she was going to be living with him. Matsuda had grabbed him by the collar and shook him like a British nanny shakes a crying baby. Very nearly screaming at Issei, both Matsuda and Motohama were ready to skin him alive when Yuma had said she too was going to be living under the same roof as him. When that came out, the girls of the class both flocked to Asia and Yuma, telling both of them to be diligent and check the bathroom for hidden cameras and be watchful when they're in the bathroom or showering or changing, because Issei will try to peep on them. Somehow Issei had managed to escape the situation with his skin intact, and now he stands with his bookcase held in his left hand, his uniform jacket hanging open, a silver shirt underneath the jacket. He had been wearing a red shirt before, but Albion had commented that morning that he didn't like the color, as it reminds him of his rival. Shrugging it off, Issei just grabbed a silver shirt from the rack and pulled it on. In front of him, Ria smiles, her red hair slowly swinging back and forth as she walks, Yuma and Asia walking behind him, Issei sighing tiredly. Oh man, what are my parents going to think when two girls ask to live with us? He's asked Rias not to hypnotize his parents unless she absolutely has to. And as the four of them walk back to his home, Issei can't imagine any scenario which doesn't end with Rias hypnotizing both of his parents into allowing both Asia and Raynare to live with him. Issei-sama, are you alright? Yuma asks, suddenly right next to him, Issei very nearly screaming in surprise, the young devil almost tripping over his own feet in surprise. Ga! Issei starts, waving his hands around. Yuma's face contorted in concern. Issei doesn't reply right away, the disguised fallen angel leaning forward slightly when Issei jumped back. Yuma's curiosity at her master's reaction plastered all over her face like a billboard. Something wrong, Issei? Rias asked casually, half turned back toward Issei and the others. Issei quickly shaking his head, recovering his composure. It's nothing, Bucho. Issei replies stoically, her pressed together in a thin line. Rias turns back around, starting down the street again with the three of them following behind her. XXX. Mom, bet this is Asia Argento and Yuma Amano Hayato. Issei begins awkwardly, both young women standing before Issei's mother and father. Sitting on their sofa, the two middle-aged humans stare in shock at the two girls standing in front of them. Growing up, their son has made no point to conceal his perverted tendencies, and they'd believe that he was never going to get a girlfriend so long as he continued to act as he was. Now they have two attractive young women asking to stay with them. Both are wearing the Ko Academy girls' uniform, Asia standing with her hands folded on her lap, her blue eyes calm and clear, her hair hanging behind her. Like Asia, Yuma wears her hair down, though she stands with her hands in front of her, her fingers fidgeting nervously as Issei's parents contemplate allowing both she and Asia to live under the same roof as him. Like Asia, she desperately doesn't want to be separated from Issei, though her motivations are very different from Asia. Unlike the blonde devil, Raynare is bound to Issei and owes him her life, and can never live down that debt, no matter what she does. Of course you'll be compensated for the extra cost. A woman's voice speaks up, Issei standing off to the right of the two currently seeking to live in his home, the third female voice standing off to their left. Long red hair and matching eyes make it clear that she's not from Japan, though her figure is one that many young girls would kill for. Speaking in a refined, ladylike manner, Rias Gremory is the epitome of everything their son Issei isn't. Looking at her, she seems to give off an air of aristocracy and grace, something Issei is sorely lacking. Issei, his father, begins slowly, turning his attention toward his son. You didn't get both of these women pregnant, did you? Falling on his face, Issei can't believe his father just said what he said. The implication in his question settling on Asia, her face turns a shade of red, Yuma following suit, though her blush isn't nearly as heavy. Chuckling lightly, Rias can't help the grin that comes to her. Issei slowly crawling back to his feet, the young demon pulling his head up above his parents' coffee table. Oto-san, Issei mumbles, and Rias clears her throat. I assure you your son has been nothing but a gentleman to both of these young ladies. Rias explains for him. This is more of a request from me, not him. Both of Issei's parents sharing a momentary glance, either of them shakes their head in denial, Rias watching them both. The high-class demon knowing enough to be able to read both of the humans, Rias nearly sure that they're going to agree to house both Asia and Yuma. We would be honored, Gremory-san. Issei's father answers her as he turns his head toward her. Smiling, Rias bows lightly toward both of Issei's parents. Thank you both very much. Rias offers earnestly, Issei pulling himself to his feet. Then I'll show both of you young ladies to your rooms. Issei's mother volunteers, standing up as both Asia and Raynare nod their heads in agreement. Fortunately for Issei, his parents bought a 5-bedroom home, his parents sharing one bedroom while Issei occupies the other. The intent had been for Issei to have a younger sibling, but his parents never bothered to conceive another child. The last bedroom reserved as a guest bedroom for anyone looking to spend the night. Now both Asia and Raynare will be occupying the bedrooms. Follow me. Issei's mother volunteers, the woman walking toward the stairs, both Asia and Raynare following her, leaving Issei and Rias alone in the living room with his father. I'm going to go take a shower, his father explains, the man standing up and heading for the steps as well. His father ascending the steps behind Raynare. Issei watches them go, his expression suspicious as the rest of his family disappears up the steps, Rias momentarily silent, her gaze settling on her only pawn. Feeling relieved? Rias asks, and Issei sighs tiredly. Regret, Issei counters, and Rias giggles playfully. Really? You're regretting having a fallen angel slave that can't disobey you? Rias counters, and Issei shakes his head. I'm going to be living with Asia-chan and her now. Issei replies. So? Rias asks. So Asia is someone I have to protect. Issei replies with a shrug. I can't put my hands on her. And Raynare? Rias asks astutely, Issei's turning down in a scowl. She tried to kill me, and I only did what I did because I thought I might get some enjoyment out of it, but now, well, bound to you now. Rias replies. Can't take it back. Did you hear how I had to spend my day at school? Issei asks, and Rias grins. I've heard a rumor or two about your friends nearly putting you in the nurse's office. They were really thrilled when they found out that the two of them were going to be living with me. Well, I've got a job for you tonight. Rias explains to him, and Issei blinks in surprise. A job? Issei asks. I thought I was still just passing out flyers. Not tonight. Rias explains, shaking her head in denial. You're going to try and get a contract tonight, and I'm going with you. Blinking, Issei's eyes go wide at that. You're coming with me? Issei blurts out in surprise, and Rias nods. I'm going to help you finally get a contract. Rias affirms, and Issei narrows his eyes. Buchu, if you offered me a reward I'd be much more motivated to land a contract, Issei suggests, and Rias s her head to the side. Reward? Rias asks, and Issei nods, his arms at his elbows, leaning forward eagerly. What would you like? Let me grope your... Issei blurts out, a part of him thinking that Rias will shoot the request down, but he has to try. Momentarily silent, Rias raises her right pointer finger to her chin, a thoughtful look settling on her features a moment, the red-haired devil considering her servant's proposition. All right. Rias agrees, and Issei practically beams with joy. Really? Issei practically jumps out of his skin. Yes. Rias replies with a nod. Awesome. Issei practically screams with joy. All I have to do is get a contract, and I can grope Bucho's rocking rack. XXX. That night Issei and Rias appear before a foreign exchange student clad in samurai armor. She was apparently going to a nearby university, and she'd forgotten her notebook, and was scared to go back to get it alone. So he'd accompanied her back and she'd retrieved her notes, only to ask if they would help her with a second request. Issei had tried to turn it down, but Rias had agreed, and the two of them together helped the strange girl to send a love letter to the guy she has a crush on. Oddly enough, the apple of her eye is a man obsessed with English knight armor. Watching the two of them walk off together, Issei feels exhausted, the young pawn incredibly relieved that the request is over, and Susan signed the contract. This means I get to get my hands on Bucho's. It's like they were made for each other, Rias speaks, snapping Issei out of his lecherous thoughts. To guess, Issei offers noncommittally. Do you believe in love, Issei? Rias asks, and Issei blinks in surprise at the question. Love? Issei asks, and Rias half turns toward him, her gaze piercing. Aya. Smiling at Issei's answer, Rias faces him with her body, her expression taking on a forlorn tone that Issei can't place. Two people finding one another, living their lives together, Rias trails. It's like a dream. Why would she be talking like that? Bucho? Issei asks, and Rias blinks, her gaze returning to its more cheerful norm. We should head back, we've had a long day. Rias explains, and Issei nods. I'm right behind you. XXX. Coming back to the club room, Issei is alone with Rias. The clubroom otherwise empty when the two of them appear from the Gremry circle. Walking to her desk, Rias is all business. Well, now that that's finished, Rias trails, and Issei doesn't wait. Bucho, about that promise. Issei begins, and Rias stops, turning to face him with her body, the red-haired devil her head to the side curiously. Promise? Rias asks, and Issei nods. You said if I got a contract I could grope your... Issei blurts out quickly, impatience in his voice. Smiling, Rias leans against the front of her desk, the president of the Occult Research Club not at all surprised by her pawn's memory. He does have an obsession with, after all. All right, Rias agrees, lowering her arms to her sides. I remember. Barely able to contain his joy, Issei is just about ready to jump out of his skin. Really? I can touch your... Yes, Rias begins. However, only from when I start counting, and only until I count to 10. Rias clarifies for him. So when Rias begins, and Issei blinks in surprise. Crap! She's already started counting. 2 Rias counts, and Issei's thoughts run. What do I do? How do I go about touching them? Should I squeeze her nipples, or maybe just cup them in my hands? 3 Rias continues. Oh man! I've already wasted 3 seconds. I can't let this chance slip by. I have to do something. 4 Don't just stand there. If you want to touch her, then touch them. Don't think about it. Albion growls in his head, the heavenly dragon's irritation clear to his current host. He's right. 5 Rias counts, now halfway through Issei's allotted time. Choosing to follow Albion's advice, Issei sticks his hands out, his fingers wrapping around Rias' sweater cows, and even through the fabric of her school uniform Issei can feel how soft her skin is, like his fingers are literally being ed in. 6 Rias mumbles, her cheeks turning red as Issei touches her, her voice carrying a hint of embarrassment and arousal. Hearing her voice, everything that is going on in that moment hits Issei like a ton of bricks. I'm groping thee of the most beautiful girl in school, and they're awesome. 7 Rias continues, the count coming half a beat slower than the prior 6 in the sequence. Blood spewing from his nose, Issei stops moving his hands, the young aficionado falling backward and hitting the floor, blood streaming down his face with his hands held in the air, his eyes like small whirlpools. Buchos, Issei mutters over and over again, Rias stopping her count as her pawn lies on the floor, mumbling to himself. Her cheeks still red, Rias looks away from him, her voice coming out in a small pout. Baka, Rias mutters, a part of her disappointed that Issei stopped touching her, though she would be loath to admit it. XXX, with the initial shock of Yuma and Asia transferring in past, the next day is much more normal. After Rias fulfilled her part of the promise, Rias simply called Asia and Yuma, the 2 of them coming to the club room to collect their roommate. Issei still mumbling to himself, though thankfully he was only mumbling nonsense when the 2 of them arrived. When asked about it by Asia, Rias simply said that she'd fulfilled Issei's request, and it was time for him to go home. It wasn't until later that night that he'd finally come back to his senses, and with Raynare around, Asia was unwilling to leave Issei alone with her, in spite of her seemingly changed attitude. Over the following week, the newly reincarnated devils and the now enslaved fallen angel develop a routine. In the morning, both Asia and Raynare, in Yuma form, come into his room to wake him up, without knocking. Once Issei is awake, he gets dressed and ready for the day, eating breakfast with them all before walking to school. School itself becomes much more normal, each day becoming more and more routine, though both Asia and Yuma both get their fair share of masculine attention, though Raynare on more than one occasion almost admits that she is in fact Issei's slave and will do whatever he orders her to do, without question. Seeing how well Issei gets along with both Asia and Yuma, both Matsuda and Motohama start asking Issei for help, for their friend to introduce the 2 of them to a girl or 2. Thinking about it, Issei had the perfect girl in mind, and as a reward Motohama showed Issei his newly discovered VIP lounge. Said lounge also just so happened to be a locker in the girls' changing room. Unfortunately for Issei, Kaneko happened to be changing when he and the other 2 members of the perverted trio were in the locker, and the white-haired devil didn't miss Issei's peeping. He wound up back in the club room as more or less one big bruise, with Asia healing him. Don't waste your time, Asia, Kaneko advises the healer, Asia choosing to ignore the statement while Raynare looks on, still in her human disguise. If you wanted to see a naked girl, Issei-senpai, you only had to tell me. Raynare explains to him, the girl reaching down and grasping her blouse, moving to pull it, and show her body to him when Issei speaks out. That's okay. Issei blurts out, fear in his voice. Kaneko sitting on one of the sofas in club room, eating a snack, glaring at him with a murderous look in her eyes. Issei, Asia mutters, unable to stop her healing, in spite of the fact that she wants him to know that she feels the same way. If you want to see a girl naked, you could just ask me, and I'll show you. Issei mutters, turning away. That's okay, Asia-chan, you don't have to do that. Chewing her lower lip, Asia doesn't say anything else, instead, focusing on healing Issei. We can talk once we get back home, Asia thinks to herself. XXX, sitting on his bed, Issei focuses, trying not to imagine either Raynare or Asia naked. I have to keep my guard up around both of them, Issei thinks to himself. Asia is someone I have to protect, and Raynare tried to kill me. If I let my guard down around either of them, I could end up really regretting it or dead. It's a sobering thought, and Issei doesn't want to end up once again at death's door. Once is enough for one lifetime, thank you very much. Light shining into his closed eyelids, Issei opens his eyes, taking in the sight of a magic circle appearing on the floor in front of him. A circle, Issei mumbles, not sure what to make of what is going on as Rias appears from the circle, wearing her school uniform. Bucho? Issei Rias begins, reaching to her waist to remove her skirt, letting it fall before reaching for her blouse. Issei mutely noting that Rias is wearing white panties as she continues. I need you to take my virginity. What? Issei blurts out in surprise, Rias' blouse falling from her body, revealing that she's wearing a matching bra. I know it's sudden, but I need you to take me now. Rias insists, reaching up to undo her bra, letting the garment fall. Bucho, what is this about? Issei asks, hoping for clarification. Do you not want me? Rias asks, and Issei quickly shakes his head no. No! Of course not. Isn't this a little rushed? I know this far from ideal, but there isn't any other way. Rias explains, pulling off her panties. Other way? Issei barely manages to enunciate, his eyes taking in the sight of Rias Grayfia in her birthday suit. Starting toward him, Rias ignores the question. I know I'm a virgin, and probably not very good, but what I want won't take much, Rias says, and Issei swallows the saliva in his mouth as Rias climbs on top of him. I am a virgin too, so Issei doesn't know what to say, and Rias smiles slightly. Then it will be a mutual gift, Rias says, leaning in and kissing him. Holy hell, her are soft. Feeling her pressing against his chest through his nightshirt, Issei's body doesn't hesitate to react, and he can feel Rias' hand brush against it, the red-haired devil pulling her from his for a moment, her fingers finding the top of his boxers. Well, you're ready and so am I. Her voice a throaty purr. Issei just nods, unable to believe what's about to happen. Pulling his boxers down far enough, Rias does all the work, Issei too stunned and dumbstruck to do anything but just lie there for nearly 5 minutes. Grayfia wouldn't arrive for over and ho. It doesn't take long for Issei to get the hang of things, and before long both he and Rias are in the thrall of carnal passion. Being devils, Issei's stamina is a lot greater than what he thought, and after his short-lived first time, Issei is much more into the swing of things. As more time passes, Rias seems to enjoy the experience more and more. After a half an hour, both Rias and Issei are enjoying themselves. Issei unable to believe that his first time is with a woman like Rias Grayfia, while at first Rias is happy that no one has shown up to interrupt them. Then as time goes on, as Issei tries to please her, the way he holds her, it causes a strange, warm feeling inside the air to the Grayfia family. After over an hour, Rias finds herself lying atop her pawn, the both of them sweaty and tired, the blankets on Issei's bed tossed aside, neither Issei nor Rias feeling the least bit cold. Lying beneath Rias, Issei can feel her pressing against his chest, Rias casually coiling a lock of Issei's hair around her pointer finger on her right hand. Having fun, Bucho? Issei asks playfully, Rias slightly frowning at Issei's referring to her by a title rather than her name. Bucho? Rias asks pointedly. You said my name when you were inside me. His cheeks turning red, Issei breaks eye contact with her, feeling a rush of embarrassment. Well, Issei mumbles, not sure what to say when a magic circle appears on the floor past the foot of the Issei's bed. Seeing the light, Issei blinks in surprise, not sure what to think as a figure emerges from the center of the circle. Rias not in the least bit surprised at the sight of the woman appearing in the room, wearing a maid outfit. Rias sitting up with her waist near Issei's. What the two of them have done is unmistakable. Standing there, Grayfia doesn't show an ounce of surprise at the sight of Rias Grayfia straddling her servant. She is rather happy that the two of them are no longer humping. She'd spent the last 20 minutes waiting outside, not wanting to interrupt them mid-coitus. The sight of her sister-in-law humping is the absolute last thing Grayfia wants to see. Grayfia Rias offers in greeting, her familiarity clear in her voice. Grayfia? Issei asks, completely clueless. Her countenance giving away nothing. Grayfia stands with her arms at her sides, her voice level and cold. So have you given your virtue to your servant? Grayfia begins, and Rias doesn't show an ounce of regret. I have, and I fully intend to remain with him. Rias explains, and Issei blinks in surprise. I'll remain with me. Issei mutters, a part of him numbly aware that what Rias just said could be interpreted as a marriage proposal. Neither your brother nor Riser-sama will be happy with this development. Grayfia replies stoically. Her brother Riser? What is she talking about? Issei thinks to himself. However, all of that can wait until tomorrow. For now, enjoy yourself. Grayfia offers, bowing before disappearing just as quickly as she appeared. Blinking, Issei turns his gaze back to Rias, the red-haired devil still completely naked, a momentary somber look on her features before she turns back to him, her gaze once again playful and happy. Well, what was that all about? Issei manages to ask, and Rias giggles playfully, suggestively pressing her against his chest as she lies down atop him. Do you really want to know now, or would you rather me show you this trick I know with my tongue? Rias asks, and Issei blinks in surprise, her intent as clear as day. Does that mean she's going to Just the thought of it has parts of his body beginning to stir, and Rias can feel it against her bare skin. Well, I'd say I have my answer. Pushing herself up to her hands and knees, Rias is about to begin moving when there's a knock at the door. Issei-san? Asia's voice carries, and Issei's eyes go wide. Oh, what fresh hell is this? Issei mumbles, not sure what to say. He desperately doesn't want Asia to come in and interrupt. Issei-sama, Yuma's voice calls out, the door opening, Issei feeling like a 5-year-old boy with his hand caught in the cookie jar. Both Yuma and Asia stand in the doorway, Asia's cheeks turning red at what she sees, while Yuma doesn't seem the least bit surprised. Both of them wear nightgowns, Asia wearing a pure white one while Yuma wears a dark gray one. Oh, what am I going to do? Issei thinks to himself, the young devil beginning to frantically rack his brain for an answer. Are you both just going to stand out there? Rias asks, and Issei blinks in surprise, her tone making it sound like, does she want them both to join in? Turning toward Asia, Yuma speaks quietly, her tone filled with encouragement. Let's go, Asia-chan, Yuma says, taking Asia's hand, the dark-haired fallen angel walking into the room, Asia stumbling behind her. What but? Asia mutters as Yuma very nearly drags her into the room, Yuma closing the door behind them. You want to be with Issei-sama, don't you? Yuma asks, and Asia breaks eye contact, looking down toward the floor as Yuma turns her attention to Rias. Do you object, Rias-sama? Smiling, Rias doesn't seem the least bit upset by the suggestion. You know what they say, the more the merrier, Rias replies, and Issei feels like he's just been hit by a ton of bricks. Are you kidding me? He haren't you, the charmer, Albion whispers teasingly, and Issei is about to open his mouth when Yuma takes off her nightgown. Yumasan, Asia mutters, not sure what to do. Turning to face Asia with her body, Yuma smiles at the young blonde. You want to make Issei-sama happy, don't you? Yuma asks, and Asia slowly bobs her head. Why, wise, Asia answers quietly, and Yuma reaches out, touching Asia by the shoulders and turning her toward Issei and Rias, the both of them still on the bed. Then show him. Yuma offers quietly, Asia reaching for the shoulders of her nightgown as Yuma takes her hands away, Asia pulling the lingerie from her body. This can't be happening. XXX. The next morning, his eyes fluttering open, Issei feels like his arms and legs are chained, a weight on all of his limbs and his waist holding him to the bed. His vision coming into focus, his head craning around to take in the sight of the 3 women still sharing his bed. Rias lies on his left side, Yuma on his right, Asia's head pressed against the bottom of his chest, just above his groin. Last night remembering what happened, a torrent of images comes to Issei's mind. For a moment the young man doesn't believe that what happened actually happened, but then Issei looks around at the 3 women sharing his bed with him, all 3 of them naked, and it hits home that what happened the night before was not a dream. I lost my virginity and I had a 4-way with 3 women. Matsuda and Motohama would never believe him. Issei has been in school with the 2 of them for years, and they've talked endlessly about having for the first time, and about being with more than one woman at one time. Most of the time it was just talk, pubescent boys fantasizing about something that was obviously never going to happen. But now Issei has done those things. He's been with a woman, done just about every UAL act he can think of off the top of his head that doesn't require toys or pain. 2 don't feel any different. Lying there with Rias, Asia and Yuma in bed with him, Issei doesn't feel any different than he did the morning before. It was like nothing has changed inside him, in spite of the fact that he's done something that many high school boys obsess over constantly, and talk about endlessly. Rias stirring on his left, Issei can feel the red-haired devil moving against his body. The president of the Occult Research Club opening her eyes groggily, reaching up to wipe at them before her curl in a pleasant smile. Good morning, Rias offers warmly, Issei returning the smile. Good morning to you too, Issei replies, and Rias giggles. Enjoy yourself last night? Rias asks playfully, and Issei nods. Yeah, Issei answers, a hint of concern coming to his voice. Did you? A part of him realizes that what happened last night could very well never happen again. If Rias didn't enjoy what happened, then Issei will very likely never even see her naked. Most human girls in high school would never even consider doing what Rias did the night before without massive amounts of alcohol being involved. But unlike the average high school girl, Issei knows Rias was born in the underworld, a pure-blooded devil very likely raised under a different moral code, and Issei knows exactly nothing about that. I did. Rias smiles at him. Relief washing over him, Issei sighs in relief. That's good, Issei trails, and Rias shifts her gaze toward Yuma and Asia, the red-haired devil pointedly glancing toward the other 2 women in the bed with them. I take it you enjoyed yourself, what with the 2 other women who were both so eager to please you, Rias prods, and Issei grins uncomfortably. That's, Issei mutters, discomfort filling him with Rias' gaze centered on him. I really did enjoy it when it was just the 2 of us, Smiling, Rias lays her head on his left shoulder, her right cheek resting against his shoulder. I did too, Rias replies, and Issei opens his mouth to respond when the beeping of Issei's alarm cuts through their conversation. The beeping incredibly loud, both Asia and Yuma begin to stir, Issei metaphorically smacking himself in the forehead. Oh, you get a harem, have zero alone time with a woman you might just have feelings for. XXX, walking to school with Rias, Asia and Yuma. Issei feels exhausted, having only slept for a few hours the night before, compounded with all the exercise that he'd gotten before falling asleep. Issei is understandably tired. Surrounded by the women he'd been with the night before, Issei hasn't spoken much since waking up that morning. Fortunately, his parents must have taken some sleeping pills the night before, because they were completely oblivious to the fact that their perverted devil son had with 3 women at the same time the night before. Eating breakfast, Issei had only spoken when spoken to, giving short, curt responses. Walking with the 3 of them, Issei doesn't know how to interact with them. In the heat of the moment, everything had just sort played out. Wonder of wonders, Rias had wanted to sleep with him, and after Grayfia left, both Yuma and Asia had ended up jumping in. Asia hadn't seemed to know what she was doing, and Rias had to educate her newest servant on what to do. Yuma, on the other hand, was more than willing, and she knew exactly what she wanted. Sighing, Issei looks up from the sidewalk in front of him, Rias walking in front of him, her red hair swaying back and forth as she walks in front of him, Asia on his right, Yuma on his left. Bucho? Issei asks, still referring to her by her title rather than her name. In the midst of everything, her name had just sort of slipped out. Issei hadn't been thinking, and he'd just spoken. Now, though, Issei's upper head has dibs on the blood supply. Frowning slightly, Rias half turns her head to look to Issei over her right shoulder. Yes, Issei? Rias asks, and Issei frowns slightly, his head lowering, the young devil breaking eye contact before he responds. Just wanted to ask you about what Grayfia-san was talking about last night, Issei explains, and Rias blinks, her face giving away nothing before she turns her head forward again. We can talk about that during club, Rias replies, and Issei nods, realizing that whatever Grayfia was talking about must be important. It's probably something personal to Bucho, Issei thinks to himself. On either side of him, Asia and Yuma both glance to Issei and then Rias, the 2 of them thinking almost the exact same thing at the same time, the same question going through both of their minds. Who is Grayfia and what connection does she have to Rias? Unfortunately for the both of them, neither Rias nor Issei appear willing to offer an answer, and sensing that neither Asia nor Yuma bother to press the issue, the both of them willing to wait until the Occult Research Club meets that afternoon to get an answer to that question. XXX, arriving at Co-Academy, Issei, Asia and Yuma all head for their homeroom, Rias parting ways with the 3 of them, Akino waiting for her president at the top of a staircase, the long-haired buxom woman smiling as Rias ascends the steps. Oh my, you were at Issei-kun's home all night, Akino trails playfully, the vice president of the Occult Research Club far from oblivious. She knows what her master went to Issei's home to do. Is that supposed to be a question, Akino? Rias asks, and Akino giggles. Did you enjoy yourself last night? Akino asks, and Rias half smiles. What do you think? Rias asks, and Akino grins. Maybe I should visit Issei-kun tonight, see what all the fuss is about. Akino pokes, and Rias grins. You'll have to get in line, Rias replies, matter-of-factly waving her hand dismissively. Oh? Akino asks. Are you planning on spending another night with him, Bucho? Akino asks, and Rias grins. Even if I were, you'd still have competition from Asia and Raynare, Rias replies. Innuendo thick in Rias' voice. Akino's dark eyes go wide at Rias' implication. You mean the 2 of them? Akino trails, and Rias nods. Just when we were about to start a second round, Rias explains. Well, at least you had one time alone with him, Akino replies, and Rias closes her eyes. Not a word of this to Sona or anyone associated with her, Rias explains to her queen. I'm going to have enough trouble dealing with that egotistic womanizer and my brother. XXX, standing in the club room, Issei can't help but glance toward the woman standing near Bucho's desk. He hadn't gotten a good look the night before, and looking at her now, Issei can't help but think she's a beautiful woman with a really nice rack and an air of elegance about her, in spite of the fact that she currently wears a maid outfit. Standing in a line are all of Ria's servants, the red-haired princess herself standing in front of them, Issei standing between Akino and Asia, the young pawn not sure what to do or what is going on. The only thing Bucho would say before Grayfia arrived was, "You'll find out soon." On the end, Kiba has the appearance of perfect calm, Raynare on his left, Asia on her left, Kaneko on the left side of Akino. Ria-sama. Grayfia begins calmly. "You know why I'm here. I assume it's to discuss my violating the terms of my engagement." Rias replies, and issei blinks, feeling like he's just been slapped. Engagement. Bucho was going to get married to someone. That's correct. Grayfia replies. You've given your purity to your servant, Haida issei, and declared to me that you intend to remain with him. Do you still feel this way? Hearing that for the first time, Kiba glances at issei, the young blonde momentarily grinning. I would give anything not to be your shoes, issei-kun. Kiba thinks to himself. Remain with me? Issei asks, but Rias and Grayfia ignore the question. That's right. Rias replies. I intend to remain with the White Dragon Emperor, Haida issei. Rias affirms, calling him by a title rather than what he is. Well, White Dragon Emperor sounds much better than my servant, or my pawn. Albion points out, issei inwardly nodding, so Grayfia replies slowly, her gaze shifting from Rias to issei, the young devil feeling like he's been caught with his hand in the cookie jar. It's true then. Grayfia trailing Rias doesn't allow the maid-clad devil to continue, instead speaking to draw Grayfia's attention back to her. So, are you going to tell Riser that our farce of an engagement is off, or will I get the? Rias asks, and Grayfia blinks in surprise, Rias' disdain for her fiancé clear in her tone. You know that it isn't that simple, Rias. Grayfia replies, and Rias blinks, the air about her seeming to jolt in surprise. You can't mean. Rias trails, fear and surprise mixing in her tone. Grayfia raising her right arm, the silver-haired maid snaps her fingers, a magic circle appearing on the floor to her right. Allow me to introduce the third son of the Phoenix family and former fiancé to Rias Gremory, Riser Phoenix. Grayfia explains, a burst of flame erupting from the magic circle. A man appears from the flame, dressed in a red suit with blonde hair and blue eyes. His shirt is open, showing a muscled chest. He looks like the epitome of a playboy. Looking at him, issei feels a pang of jealousy. He's a handsome man, and issei doesn't doubt for a moment that he enjoys more than his fair share of feminine attention. However, the look in Rias' eyes, a glare that could melt tungsten, shows that Rias is in no mood to appreciate any of Riser's aesthetic qualities. Rias practically spits his name. The flame-fading Riser doesn't look any more pleased to see Rias than Rias is to see him. Where is that low-born son of a bitch? Riser growls, and issei feels the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. Why do I get the feeling that he's talking about me? Balling her hands into fists, Rias doesn't give issei the opportunity to answer. Riser, you will not address a member of my family in that manner. Rias replies, and Riser finally looks at Rias, his expression overflowing with disgust. You dare correct me, you dirty whore? Riser asks, and issei can practically taste the contempt in Riser's voice. The young devil doesn't like it one bit. Balling his hands into fists, issei is about to call out his sacred gear when Grayfia speaks, her voice seeming to drop the temperature in the room to almost freezing. There will be no violence here. Grayfia cuts in, both Rias and Riser seeming to relax at Grayfia's words. Anyway, Rias begins, crossing her arms over her chest. Our engagement is over, Riser, so go back to the underworld and find some other girl to add to your harem. Hearing the word harem, issei's ears visibly twitch. Harem? This bastard has a harem? The question burning inside of issei. Riser isn't cowed by Rias' dismissal. I'll go back to the underworld, after I kill that low-born bastard that took what was rightfully mine. Riser replies, and issei blinks, any thoughts of a harem disappearing with Riser's retort. He's going to kill me. His surprise clear on his face. Asia and Raynare both mirror the expression, her mouth falling open. Rias can't believe what she's just heard. You can't be serious. Rias replies, and Riser crosses his arms over his chest, his curling in a grin. I am. Riser replies. As your fiancé, I am entitled to the of killing the bastard that you chose over me. Blinking, issei feels like he's a deer in headlights. What? Issei blurts out, his fear plain in his voice, his eyes turning to Rias. Bucha, what is he talking about? Rather than Rias, Grayfia is the one to answer. Rias-sama is the heir to one of the noble devil families. Grayfia explains. As such, a fiancé was arranged for her. The point of this arrangement to continue the line of pure-blooded devils. As the heir to the Gremory family, Rias' virginity was very valuable to the other noble houses. Now that she has lost it by being with you, Riser-sama has the right to challenge you, the man who took his place. Why? Issei asks. What point would a death match even have? Simple, you low-born fool. Riser replies. If the man Rias chose to give her virginity to is weak, then I get the of killing him and showing just how far the Gremory family has fallen. If you're weak, then you don't deserve to father the next heir of a noble house. His mouth dropping open, issei can't believe that he's going to have to fight in a death match. Then let me fight. Rias steps up, speaking to Grayfia. I'm the one who seduced issei. It isn't his fault, and he had no idea. Listening to Ria's plea, Grayfia slowly shakes her head no. I'm afraid that is unacceptable, Ria-sama. Grayfia explains, Rias opening her mouth to ask why when Grayfia continues. Even without your purity you are still the heir of a noble house. Were you to die, we devils would be losing a pure-blooded devil. Were your servant to die, then all that is lost is a reincarnated devil. What about Riser? Rias asks, pointing toward him. If Issei kills him, the Phoenix clan will lose its third child. Unlike you, Rias-sama, Riser-sama is not the heir to his clan. His loss will be far less impactful than yours. Her mouth hanging open, Rias can't believe what she's just heard. If Issei were to fight Riser in his current condition, Issei would lose. If Rias were the one to take him on, at least it would be a fair fight. That can't be. Yuma shakes her head in denial. I don't want Issei-sama to die. Asia nodding. Issei can feel her hands wrap around his arm possessively. Issei momentarily glancing toward Asia to see her leaning toward him, her fear at his death clear to him. Grayfia blinking, she narrows her gaze toward Yuma. An enslaved fallen angel Grayfia trails, turning her gaze to Rias. I had no idea you had managed that. Yuma opening her mouth to clarify. Rias speaks, cutting her off. That doesn't matter. Rias replies. Having Issei participate in this madness is nothing more than a murder sentence. Grayfia nodding, she isn't the least bit surprised at Rias' statement. That fact was not lost on Surzek-sama. Grayfia explains to Rias. It has already been agreed that a 14-day training period will be allocated. 14 days? Rias asks, and Grayfia nods. You will have 2 weeks to prepare your servant for the match. Grayfia explains, and Rias turns to Riser. And you're all right with this? She asks, and Riser grins. As fun as a slaughter is, I would rather have a slight challenge when I kill that idiot. Riser explains, and Issei can't take it anymore. Oh yeah, you Yakitori bastard. Issei steps forward, pointing his finger toward Riser. I'll be the one to beat you into the ground. Riser's curling into a grin, he isn't the least bit afraid of Issei's threat. I hope you remember those words when I'm tearing your filthy heart out. Riser replies. I'm going to show it to you before I kill you. Thanks for watching this video. If you really enjoy this video, like, subscribe, and comment down below, and turn on that bell notification. Don't forget to support and follow the DarkSwordMage for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story, link in the description. See you in the next video. Goodbye.